Good afternoon. Welcome to the New America Foundation. I'm Peter Bergen. I run the International Security Program here. We have a great panel to discuss the important topic of reporting in Pakistan, which is now, as many of you know, one of the most dangerous countries in the world for journalists to work in. We're very honored to have Kati Martin, who is a long-time board member of New America Foundation, was instrumental in New America Foundation's decade and a half of growth. She's on the board of the Committee to Protect Journalists. She's also the author of 8 books. And she has just recently returned from a delegation that went to Pakistan, met with Nawaz Sharif, the Prime Minister. On that delegation was Joel Simon in the blue suit at the end here, who is the executive director of CPJ. In between them is Reza Rumi, who is a well-known Pakistani journalist. He's author of multiple books and also contributor to the Friday Times, the Express Tribune, Express News. He's one of the most well-known TV personalities in Pakistan. He survived an assassination attempt on March 28th, a very serious assassination attempt which happened about a week after Kati and Joel had left their discussions with the Prime Minister and their tour around Pakistan, which was well covered in the Pakistani press about this important issue. And so we're going to have sort of a conversation between the three of us, the four of us, and then we'll open it up to your questions. So Kati, starting with you, tell us a little bit about the content of your conversation with Prime Minister Sharif, and what he said, and the takeaways that you had from that conversation. Joel, chime in as needed.
Yes, please. Well, thanks, Peter. Hello, everybody. First, let me just say how pleased I am that New America continues to engage in this really important conversation about Pakistan and about journalism in Pakistan. Pakistan, however complex and sometimes deeply upsetting and even annoying to the United States government, is a vital partner. And my husband always said that in the AFPAC equation, a phrase that he coined, really it should be PAC-AF, and that Pakistan was the more important factor in that equation. And indeed it is. So we have to continue, like it or not, to be engaged. And for us at the Committee to Protect Journalists, the situation for our colleagues there is dire. And we are going to stay on top of that. And we are determined not only to give these very brave, Reza doesn't like it when I call him the bravest of the brave. He says he doesn't want to be the bravest of the brave, but indeed he is. And people like Reza who really risk their lives on a almost daily basis to cover events in Pakistan are what stand between a purely authoritarian government and an aspiring democracy. So essential not only for us as journalists to have people like Reza free to do their jobs in security, but essential for the United States government's interest too, because there's only one thing that separates a democracy from every other form of government, and that's a free press. So this is not just a minor issue. It's at the core of American engagement in Pakistan. And although Pakistan is one of the most dangerous places for journalists to work, as Peter noted, we had an extremely productive mission and came away feeling that the trend was in the right direction. But nothing is ever simple in Pakistan, as all of you Pakistani watchers and Pakistanis know. It's one of the most complex places in the world. So to return in a long-winded answer to Peter's question about the meeting with Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, It was an extremely, in both tone and substance, an extremely positive meeting. And I've been doing these missions for the Committee to Protect Journalists for 20 years and have done them in some of the most unpleasant places in the world, because where else do journalists have trouble? And I must say that this was the most positive meeting I've ever had with a head of state, in that there was no defensiveness, no, what are you talking about? You've got the wrong facts. Here are my facts, which diverge from your facts. None of that. No pushback from the Prime Minister. On the contrary, he was well briefed on the issues that we raised, and very of a mind to accommodate our we had a wish list, and he added his own. And the conversation did not stay in the confines of his office, because the following day he repeated officially the concessions that he had made, which I'm about to get to. And I think I had a very distinct feeling that the Prime Minister understands that Pakistan's global image has really suffered as a result of the murder of journalists, the impunity with which that is happening. And by our count, it's 47 journalists murdered, targeted specifically for doing their job. So we're not talking about people caught in a crossfire, but these are targeted assassinations of the sort that thank God, Reza dodged. But he's going to tell you the very dramatic story of how he escaped the assassin's bullets. So shall I go on? I don't want to hog the air.
No, you're not hogging the air. We've got plenty of time. So what did you ask him for? So,
and Joel, please feel free to if I miss something. Here are the things that we agreed to with the Prime Minister, or that the Prime Minister agreed to. The formation of a new body, a council to be made up of representatives of the government and the media, and a special body that will be sort of a central switchboard for cases of abuse of journalists. And journalists who feel threatened will now have a place to go, kind of a hotline, if you will, with journalists on it. And the Prime Minister immediately appointed the third member of our delegation, Ahmed Rashid, whom I'm sure most of you know, the distinguished Pakistani journalist and author, to be the first member of that new body. And Ahmed agreed with only a little reluctance. But anyway, he's on it, and they're going to, I think they've appointed some government officials as well. So that's a body information. Additionally, the Prime Minister also announced a special prosecutor to deal with cases of both murders and other attacks against journalists. And I forgot to say, please turn your cell phones off.
Yes, indeed. Including mine.
Including yours. And so one central special prosecutor, and then 4 regional special prosecutors to deal with cases of attacks against journalists. Additionally, he agreed, after we pointed out how painful and cumbersome it is to get visas for American journalists or Americans in general to go to Pakistan, he immediately turned. Yes.
That's interesting, because a sort of follow-up question there is, if you're an American journalist going to Pakistan, you get these Islamabad, Karachi, Lahore visas only.
Right.
Yes. So was he open to? Because that's a very big issue.
It is. I mean, we mentioned that, and he, without committing directly to that specific thing, talked about how important it is that journalists come to Pakistan and cover the country and cover it in a diverse way. And then we did ask him about the issue involving Declan Walsh, the New York Times correspondent who was expelled from Pakistan and has not been allowed in. And we asked him to try and resolve that situation, and he did commit to doing that. So it was in that context that we talked about these issues.
Huh.
Yeah, so I think those were, and in the upcoming, if they indeed take place, negotiations with the Taliban, we asked that he put the issue of journalists' rights to practice their profession unhindered, and he agreed to that. So, as I said, nothing is ever a straight or smooth road in Pakistan, and the week after we left, Raza suffered an attack.
Well, so Raza, what happened?
Well, I think, well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. What happened is, I mean, is nothing, I would say, extraordinary given what is happening in Pakistan in general, and then the figures that Kati mentioned, 47 or so. And if you look at there's a newly launched report by Amnesty as well, which also cites some rather ghastly cases of journalists under fire. So, I mean, the irony is that I'd been writing about that and speaking about that, and to be a victim of all of that was the kind of most dramatic part of it. And basically, I'd left my television show in the evening, and I was going home, and at a corner of a dark sort of street which leads to a market, there were some assassins waiting. And
This is in Islamabad?
This is in Lahore.
In Lahore.
In Lahore. And on the night of March 28th. And they sprayed bullets. First of all, they targeted the driver who was taking me home. And he, I think, instantly died because they were they were trained assassins. And thereafter, my instinctive reaction was that at the sound of first bullet was that I thought that, oh, finally it has happened what I'd been dreading. Because I had received threats, and I was told in January that my name was on a hit list of the Taliban.
Who told you that?
That was, the Taliban posted it on their website to begin with.
That's nice.
Very thoughtful. Yeah.
The wonders of the internet.
So you had a heads up.
I had a heads up, and then there were all these, messages on social media and emails, and the group which I had joined in January, the Express group, which is both a television and a print medium sort of company, and they were also under attack. So they had been attacked, I think, thrice before that.
When you say they've been attacked, explain.
Well, I mean, in early January, their crew in Karachi was attacked, and 3 media workers lost their lives. The bureau chief in Peshawar, somebody had planted a bomb outside his house. He found out in time, got it defused, so he survived. And then there was random firing at the Karachi office again in late 2013.
So this is part of a pattern relatively recent.
There was part of it was part of a pattern. And the paper,
were they targeting Express, or were they targeting particular journalists, or it's not clear?
Well, I think they were targeting the whole group because they were like attacking different offices in different places. And so because I had this sort of subconscious fear, and people had been warning me that don't say this and don't do this and don't cross this line or that line, and so I immediately ducked and sort of lay down on the floor of the car, and there were almost 7 bullets which were fired towards me from the back, from the side, from below. But because I was flat and well below the kind of aim that the shooters were taking, I survived.
What sort of vehicle was it?
This was a car, a Toyota Corolla car. And
how many bullets did they fire?
They fired over 20 bullets. 12 shells were found by the police, but they were, because they had sprayed bullets so randomly as well. I mean, and these were submachine guns. So they had basically, they were trying to ensure that the target was achieved. But sadly, they failed, happily for me.
For me too. I'd say we're all happy. Sadly.
So, I mean, one has to empathize with all,
Only a journalist would say that.
Really, I think that goes too far. in
that goes a bit too far. I admit I was
What was
just
your
being...
family's reaction?
Well, obviously the family was completely traumatized because you see, I had a safe career with the government of Pakistan. That's how I started. I was in the administrative service, and then I went on to the Asian Development Bank as a governance and policy expert. I left all of that to do journalism in 2008. I mean, one of the colleagues here, he knows me from my pre-journalism days. And so I did that largely because with the return of democracy in 2008, I thought there was increased space for public engagement and sort of correction of the narratives which exist in Pakistan, particularly in the vernacular press and the television, where you had all these conspiracy theories and laundering of various extremist ideologies. And I thought, well, now is a democracy and things are looking up, so it's time to jump into the fray. So I was writing before that.
And that's one of the good things about journalism in Pakistan, right?
Yes.
I mean, that there is, and that's a sort of Musharraf legacy. It's one of the few good things that he did.
Yes, he did. The deregulation of media and this whole opening up of the industry. And you have nearly 90 TV channels in Pakistan. You have over 125 FM radio stations and 600 plus newspapers. It's a thriving, booming industry.
Yes. This is the paradox.
This is the paradox. So on the one hand, you have this huge, quest for freedom of expression, free expression, reporting, etc. And on the other, you have all these elements, both within the state and particularly the non-state actors.
And importantly, you were reporting both in English and Urdu? Or?
Yes. I was the television engagement for the last 3 years. You see, that's what got me to trouble, because I was writing in the English press, reporting and op-eds, etc.
Which no one cares about.
Nobody really cares. I mean, you guys read it actually.
Right.
But I mean,
Religiously.
yes.
It's what's said in the Urdu press that is the problem.
Yeah.
So I moved on to the to television because I thought that the audience was huge.
Yeah.
And it did make an impact, and that's where perhaps you needed alternative voices and more emphasis on facts rather than fiction and opinion and whatever.
Why go there?
Why go there, exactly. Well, now I really think why did I do that? But I think it was a very fascinating experience, to engage. I even had a show with one of the sort of clerics, which I had started in February, and he was a hardliner Deobandi cleric, and I was.
What's his name?
Hafiz Ashrafi, and I mean who's sort of veering towards moderation these days on the media. But the idea was to have an engagement with him and have a discourse, because you can set things, you can reset the narrative through a dialogue, a discourse. But I think some of the issues that I raised, particularly in defense of the Shiite population of Pakistan, in defense of the Pakistani Christians and other non-Muslim communities, perhaps landed me into trouble, because the hardliners, the extremist fringe, considers them as infidels or apostates, and those who advocate the cause of apostates are apostates themselves.
And that is a death sentence.
And the punishment for that, according to some schools of thought, is death. And they don't really wait for a court to do that. They have enough ammunition. So I think this is the problem that the booming booming press as an industry faces, is that the state actors are identifiable. Pakistan has a history of media struggling against an authoritarian state under various dictatorships, and launching and sort of finding their space and quest for more freedoms. But in the last decade or so, the non-state actors have not just multiplied, but we've also seen a parallel weakening of state writ in grappling and tackling that challenge, because there's so many, because there's a regional conflict, there's a domestic conflict, and there's zones of Pakistan which are ungoverned spaces, that you have more and more mushrooming and sanctuaries of these non-state actors, and therefore sometimes they're in league with the state groups, sometimes they're autonomous or semi-autonomous, and so it is very difficult to even identify who attacks whom. So so right after I was at home for 10 days locked up because the police told me that they would come back. They have missed the target, and so you can't leave the house. So I was under virtual house arrest, not being able to go. Lots of police outside, and I wasn't really sure how far the police were compromised or not, because you don't know. There's a lot of infiltration of extremism in these in these institutions as well. So I had no choice but to leave Pakistan, and because I have some family here, so this was an easier port of refuge or recourse. But right after I arrived, I think in a few days, the police arrested a gang of 6 people who belong to Lashkar-e-Jhangvi.
Who are they?
And Lashkar-e-Jhangvi is a hardline anti-Shia extremist organization with the clear aim to purify Pakistan of the Shiite infidels.
So your comments about Shiism may have been...
Well, and the comments and a lot of advocacy for the Ahmadi community, which was excommunicated.
Who are they?
The Ahmadis are were a sect in Muslims in Pakistan who were declared as non-Muslims by the Pakistani Parliament in 1974. And they think they are Muslims, but the Pakistani state thinks that they are non-Muslims. So all of us have to sign a declaration that I denounce the Ahmadiyya sect and what they believe in. So each time I have to apply for my passport or ID card, I have to sign that declaration. All of us have to do that.
I did not know that. That is interesting. The Ahmadis, their beliefs about Islam seem to be analogous to Mormon beliefs about Christianity.
Well, I mean,
they're
quite close.
Yeah.
Quite as an analogy, yes.
Yeah.
But I think the issue is that my line always was that I don't want to get into the theological aspect of it, because they have been suffering lots of discrimination in Pakistan. Lots of killings have gotten their way, and the students are discriminated in colleges, schools, etc. So I used to say these things even on the state television. And
the situation is worse now for minorities in Pakistan. I think it's the worst that it's probably ever been for Christians, for Shia.
For the last few years, indeed. Because
and why is that?
Why? I think it has largely to do with the rise of the Pakistani Taliban and the affiliates in the mainland Pakistan, like Lashkar-e-Jhangvi or others.
Here's where it gets complicated, because these Lashkar parties or SEPA have some electoral significance for Nawaz Sharif himself, right?
Yes. Well, thank you for raising that. I think this is again a paradox and again a problem, because Nawaz Sharif does want to clean up Pakistan and has some good intentions, or at least he had before the elections when people voted for him in good numbers. But on the other hand, he's also tied down with his popular support base in the Punjab, some of which is linked to these extremist organizations. But really, I don't think it is that huge.
Yeah.
I think it is more of a fear factor, because this particular group has, they did face prosecution earlier. It is very difficult to prosecute them as well, by the way, because they eliminate witnesses and they scare the judges. So there have been multiple cases. If you Google it, you will find like dozens of such cases. But the problem is that the politicians in Pakistan are also afraid. They are under fear.
And they have good reason to be afraid if they can kill Salman
Taseer,
Benazir
Bhutto, of all the Shahbaz Bhatti, who was this Christian leader, a federal minister for minorities, and a real sort of, the Pakistani Christians look towards him for their redressal of their grievances, etc. And so there is a climate of fear that the politicians face. And so therefore their public narrative is that to appease the Taliban, particularly the Pakistani Taliban, because you already have to appease the Afghan Taliban.
Do you think there will be an operation in North Waziristan?
I think a partial operation has already started, but I don't see a full-scale operation going on, largely because of the fear of reprisal attacks in the Punjab, because the affiliates in the Punjab province, which is nearly 10 to 11, 100 to 110 million people in Pakistan, that is where the fear of reprisal attacks is the greatest.
Because I've heard that the military actually wants to do this operation now, and the civilian leadership doesn't want to do it. Is that?
I think that is true to a great extent, because there is a lot of pressure within the ranks of the military. You have nearly 5,000 military personnel who have been killed in the last 1 decade. You have nearly 5 generals who were killed by the Pakistani Taliban and their affiliates. This is even a greater tally than the 3 wars that Pakistan waged with India. And so therefore you have this really strange situation where the military is facing all these losses. There's a growing pressure within the ranks to do something about it, because they feel angry about this, and the politicians sadly have a shorter time period in front of them, because they're looking at the election in the next 3-4 years. So they're looking for a quick fix. So if talks can deliver some sort of a basic peace.
Can you think of a time when talks with the Taliban have ever delivered anything?
I don't think that, I can't think of a time, because nearly half a dozen deals which were done by the military itself under Musharraf and later failed. And one was done in the past government in Swat, which also foundered, and then you had to go in with the military and take action.
So are these talks just for preparation, as a way of a public relations exercise to say, hey, we exhausted every option and now we're going to do the military option, or do they really believe that they're possible, that the talks will actually yield something?
You're asking me very tough questions.
Well, no.
Sorry, for which I'd rather.
Okay, well let's go to the next question, which is Hamid Mir. Of course, he was somebody I've known for 15 years. In many ways,
maybe not everybody's familiar with the Hamid Mir
Hamid
case.
Mir, basically he's in a sense the Larry King of Pakistan.
But maybe
a younger Larry King.
And maybe more serious as a journalist.
I mean, but I think he's, and I first met him, just a little bit of background. I first met him when he was essentially a Taliban sympathizer, I think it would be safe to say. He was editing a paper called Awsaf, which is one of the early languages, basically pro-Taliban. And this is back in '97. And over time he's evolved significantly, and I think that he's taken very brave stances on what the ISI has been doing in Balochistan, or the Pakistan Army in general, disappeared people into the ISI, a brave stance against the Taliban. He survived a very similar attack in 2012, right, where there was a bomb under his car in Islamabad. Luckily, he discovered it. So now he's in hospital. He's been seriously wounded, or pretty seriously wounded, stable condition.
Yes.
So tell us.
It was just a week after.
Yeah, nearly. In fact, a fortnight after the attack on me and my driver and the companion I had in the car. So I think Mir was attacked and again sprayed with bullets, and unluckily, he got 6 bullets in his body, and most of which have been taken out, but I think there are two which are problematic, and the doctors are still grappling. But he's stable. He's conscious.
And he's conscious. Okay.
And what happened that while he was taken to the hospital, and because he had been making these charges against the ISI on his television show as well, that because of his advocacy on the Baloch missing persons, the insurgency in Balochistan has been ongoing for a decade now, and
isn't it more like 5 decades now?
Well, I think with this intensity, it started under Musharraf after the murder of Akbar Bugti,
right,
the separatist leader, Baloch nationalist leader rather, and it had died down prior to that. It had kind of phased out, but it was rekindled by Bugti's murder in 2006.
Yeah.
And thereafter, it has been a very, very serious sort of challenge to the Pakistan military. So the military has had to deal with it in a rather heavy-handed fashion. And Hamid Mir was one of the few media persons who was regularly taking up the case of the missing young insurgents.
And again, he's doing this in Urdu.
He was doing this in Urdu and
on
the
TV.
television.
And it's a popular program.
The largest TV network you have in Pakistan.
Which is Geo.
Which is Geo network. And sadly what happened is that while he was in the hospital, his television channel flashed the pictures of DG ISI for nearly 8 hours, accusing and his family, his brother came on to the television saying that Hamid had said if something happens to him, it would be the ISI responsible. Now, you know, personally, if you ask me, this is poor journalism.
Let's back up 1 second. So DG of ISI is who?
The DG of ISI is a military general who reports to the Prime Minister, but is the leading sort of intelligence.
And he's the equivalent of the CIA director, more or less.
Equivalent of the CIA director,
but it's a military organization.
Precisely.
And his picture was continually flashed
for 8 hours
on the screen, which we also consider poor journalism.
Yeah. Because we don't, there was absolutely no evidence.
Was no investigation.
I mean, it's one thing for Hamid Mir's brother, Amir Mir, to go on and say, I think the ISI is responsible.
Yeah.
It's another thing for the journalist at Geo to put up the picture of the guy who runs ISI.
It was a highly provocative act, and what has happened is that it triggered a media war, an intermedia war.
Because?
Well, I mean, I think that just backing up, Peter, going back to your first question, is going back, what's the political context in which this discussion is taking place? And I think these two incidents were almost like they were both written to highlight the challenges that the media faces and the Prime Minister faces. The issue of journalist killing in Pakistan as an international issue is a very significant challenge confronting the government. Certainly goes back to Daniel Pearl.
Yeah.
And that put this issue on the agenda as a global challenge. What are the risks of reporting these kinds of issues in Pakistan? And we know what a very significant issue that the Pearl killing was for the Musharraf government. Well, after the Pearl killing, and there was a significant investigation and convictions in that killing, the killings continued, but the journalists who were targeted were Pakistani journalists.
Right.
And there's a lot of attention now, thank God, on these two incidents.
But
the reality is
these are national figures, right?
These are national figures.
Right.
And most of the journalists killed are not national figures.
And they're reporting in Baluchistan.
And they're reporting in Baluchistan, or they're reporting in the
Fata.
in Fata, in
Yeah.
the tribal areas, in Peshawar, or the
But they're serious about both of the officials. Pakistani officials are approaching both of these incidents with more seriousness.
But I want to put
Yeah.
this in context. So
Yeah.
for the leadership, this is a problem. And I think that Nawaz Sharif came in with a relatively clean slate because he did not have an antagonistic relationship with the media.
Yeah.
And the media was actually quite supportive of his campaign. And I think to a certain extent he owes
His
that
election.
I mean, I don't know, I wouldn't go that far, but certainly the media and the positive coverage of his campaign played a critical role in his election, and he realized that. And he wants to try and calm this environment. Well, what are the forces that want to subvert that effort? They are the forces that attacked you, and they are the forces, you know, let's put aside the quality of the journalism and for a moment, the forces that have been drawn into this debate in terms of the attack on Hamid Mir. So these are the forces within Pakistani society that are setting the parameters of public debate. On one side you have the Taliban, on the other side you have the security forces and the ISI, which define any criticism as a threat to national security. Journalists who cross those lines are threatened, they're targeted, and the question is, can Nawaz Sharif do anything about this?
Well, that raises a very good question, which is what are the self-imposed red lines that journalists, as a general rule, follow in Pakistan? Because there are, I mean, what is...
Yeah. I mean,
I mean, obviously you crossed over them, but I mean, sketch it out for us. If I'm trying to like stay alive as a Pakistani journalist, what am I not writing about or talking about?
And additionally, to Peter's question, what effect have the attacks on you and Hamid Mir? To what extent have they chilled the media environment as a result of how different is it now than even when we were there a few weeks ago?
Right.
In light of this, because there was. You know, we spent a lot of time with your colleagues, and there was this sense of forward movement.
Yes.
To what extent has that now been chilled by these attacks?
Well, I mean, I think some of the questions, Peter, you were asking me on the military and etc. are the kind of red lines, you know. just to give you an example to illustrate it rather
Yeah.
on the spot. Okay, but I think in general, staying alive and staying safe means that you don't get into trouble or do not report freely or on the powerful actors. And as Joel rather succinctly put, that on the one hand you have the might of the state, the security forces, the ISI, the IB, and the other intelligence agencies. And on the other hand, you have three kinds of non-state actors. One are the violent extremists. Then you have the separatists in Balochistan, who also, by the way, kill and attack journalists. And the third kind you have are the political parties or the gangs affiliated with the political parties.
Yes.
And one of them, one of the young journalists of GeoTV, again killed a few years ago, was killed by a gang which was affiliated with a political party in Karachi, the port city of Pakistan. And that thankfully that is the only trial which has been prosecuted and the killers have been punished.
Walid Khan Babar.
Yes, Babar,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So,
Walid
I
Khan
mean, that
Babar.
raises an incredibly important issue, which is like Benazir Bhutto's death has not really been properly investigated by any standard in Pakistan. And I think we know who killed her. I mean, I think it's Bayatullah Masood overall. But so the problem is that the impunity, I mean, Salman Tazir's assassin was the guy who was his bodyguard, so
Yes.
that was relatively easy. But I mean, do you have any confidence that, whether it's Hamid Mir or in your own case, that the real people responsible will be brought to justice?
Peter, this is one of the greater dilemmas. I mean, I'm positive that the government has arrested some people, but if I look at the track record of our justice system in general, I'm not too optimistic.
Yeah.
And the reason is, it's not that there's no will to do that, but I think even as a state, Pakistani, prosecution and trial, services have declined in the last 2 decades.
And simple forensics are
missing.
are really
Difficult
very
to-
primitive. Crime scenes are not taped off typically.
Right.
Evidence is
like Benazir
still-
Bhutto's case.
Well, they hosed
Yeah.
it down, right?
Yeah,
half an
Yeah.
hour afterwards.
Yeah.
So
half an hour after, exactly. So
Yeah.
here, I mean, I mean, I think the real test of the Sharif administration, as you put it, that he is keen and he comes with a clean slate, etc., would be to get these cases
But
investigated
surely
and
that's something
prosecuted.
that the U.S. government could actually be quite hopeful with. I mean, we have a whole LEGAT, FBI sort of program inside embassies that provide technical assistance for this kind of
Peter,
thing.
I think it's a political. It's
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
yes, there's
Yeah.
if they we have evidence with the Pearl killing
Yeah.
and with the Walid Khan Babar case, that despite these tremendous obstacles, and let's be clear, in the Walid Khan Babar case, they were killing witnesses one after the next, 6 witnesses killed, yet they still managed to convict people. Where there is will, there is evidence
Yeah.
that they're able to solve these crimes. So this is a question of political will. But
Yeah.
but if you want to go back to a sort of another case that highlights the challenge, it's the Salim Shahzad case. Now I happen to be in
Well,
Pakistan.
tell us what that case
Okay,
is.
I will. I happen to be in Pakistan in May 1st, 2011. I arrived. Next day, the Bin Laden raid came down. We had a
They knew you were coming.
They knew I was coming. Some people were a little suspicious. I can assure you, I had nothing to do with it. But the next day, we had a meeting with President Zardari, a similar kind of meeting, and we talked about some of the challenges. And I think, personally, given his role, they were even more significant. But we had a very positive conversation. And then I was there during this period in which this press that Musharraf had unshackled for the first time challenged these sort of issues that had never been discussed, the power and the lack of accountability by the military and the security agencies, and began challenging them, and then in a very aggressive way. And the ISI responded, according to many of my colleagues I was speaking with, by inviting journalists to tea, which is one of their favorite tactics, and kind of telling them, hey, this is just warning you for your own safety. We're hearing some threats about you, or just these conversations are friendly, but they always have an edge. And Salim Shahzad was one of the journalists who was probing most aggressively about the relationships.
Yeah. Well, can I just
Go ahead.
make a point about Salim Shahzad?
Yeah.
which really is, it's a form of a question, which is, how accurate was his journalism?
Well, I mean, I don't know the answer to that, but I think
Can
the
I just
question.
say something on that, on the
Yeah.
accuracy of,
I mean,
you
but-
know,
but let me just
okay,
make one
Okay.
point,
finish,
because I'm just.
and then I want to say something about
I mean, I don't know the answer to that, but it was
Yeah.
accurate enough
Yeah.
that it got him killed. In
Yeah.
other words,
Yeah.
we don't know what's accurate, what's not accurate, but
Yeah.
but there's compelling evidence that that was a state operation.
Yeah.
That killed him. So
Yeah.
either it was accurate and they killed him because it was accurate, or it was not accurate and they were upset that it was inaccurate. We'll never really know the
Okay,
answer.
I just want to say right here that we've already been critical of Hamid Mir's GOTV flashing the head of the ISI's image continuously as not being good journalism, and our colleagues, with every respect in Pakistan, are not perfect. Only
Right.
we are perfect.
Right.
That's a joke.
Yeah.
Nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
Nobody's perfect. However, there is never a reason to shoot journalists.
Yeah.
If you don't like their reporting,
Yeah.
do a counter report. Write a letter to the editor,
there are various ways of
or
countering that.
go on TV and say this guy didn't do enough investigation. You do not kill journalists as a way to express your dissent with their reporting. So I just wanted to be
No, that-
perfectly clear about that before we.
But I think I'd like to
The
add
burden is on the
yeah.
killers.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I think, Kati, that is the issue, that Salim Shahzad's journalism raised a lot of questions. It also was controversial in many respects. But the problem is that, there is simply no justification for what happened.
Ever.
Can I ask you then, in more detail, to explain the investigation and your conclusions, and have they been accepted in any kind of official way by the Pakistani government?
I think what the Pakistani government did, that the initial, because Salim Shahzad had also done, he had sent out an email to the Human Rights Watch and a media house, the chief editor of Dawn Group, saying that if something happens to him, that he had been called in by the ISI and threatened, etc. And so that became the kind of circumstantial lead towards the kind of state operation which people refer to. So in response to that, and it was very, very ghastly what happened, because his body had been buried. It was then searched. It was exhumed and identified. So it was a very tragic case overall. And then a commission was set up, a very high-powered commission headed by a Supreme Court justice of the Pakistani court. And they deliberated for months on that. They came up with a report, but unfortunately the report was not very clear, because the kind of evidence and testimonies which were required to prove that Salim Shahzad was killed by elements within the state or otherwise was not there. So, but the good part of that commission report is that it did give some guidelines on the reform of Pakistan's intelligence apparatus as a whole, and vis-a-vis their engagement with media. And now, after Hamid Mir's case, there has been some debate that those recommendations are still unimplemented or not considered.
And the Prime Minister raised the case with us.
He did raise
Salim
it.
Shahzad. We did not raise it, but we acknowledged the progress that had been made on the Wali Khan Babar case,
That's right.
which is significant.
That's right.
And then he said that we have to move on the Salim Shahzad case. So
I think it's the U.S. government view that there was an ISI operation.
Absolutely, and I think that's been fairly well documented. I think Mullen
yes.
basically
He
made
did.
that claim.
Yeah, I think it was raised a lot by the U.S. government, and perhaps, but I just want to steer it back to what happened within Pakistan, is that the inquiry commission did interview hundreds of people. Many witnesses came forth. Many people from within the media came forward, gave their testimonies. But this could not be established. I mean, I'm neither defending the ISI nor trying to drag it into the.
By the way, I'm glad you
course of-
raised Danny Pearl because,
Yeah.
I mean, sitting on this dais and we were debating the question of what did the Pakistanis know about Osama bin Laden just 10 days ago was
Yeah.
Carlotta Gul, who of course was pretty badly roughed up
Absolutely.
Yeah.
in Quetta by
Yeah.
some kind of law enforcement types, right?
Security.
Did you ever, did CPJ ever take that case up?
We knew about it, but Carlotta at the time decided, not to make a step.
But Declan is okay with you raising the issue of why can't I come? I mean,
Oh,
he was,
yeah.
he
Oh,
was,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
No,
That-
I stopped off in London on the
Yeah.
way to Islamabad to meet with Declan and get
And
guidance from him on what he
he
wanted.
practically
and
he's been in Pakistan so long he could have a Pakistani passport, right? He's
exactly.
been there for 8 years,
and
right?
as a matter of fact, he isn't. I don't know whether this is the Times' articulated and official position, but Declan is not clamoring to become to resume being the Times bureau chief in Pakistan. He wants to be able to go to Pakistan, among other things. All his worldly goods are in Islamabad. He was given 48 hours to pack up, and the time that he spent reporting on the election. So he wants the persona non grata status lifted so
Yeah.
that he can come and go normally. And it's not a normal situation for Pakistan to not have a New York Times bureau chief.
Well, I mean,
in
even
place.
China doesn't do this, right?
No.
I mean, it's pretty. So what was
Yeah.
Nawaz? What did Nawaz Sharif say to you about?
Well,
it?
he said he was extremely agreeable in saying that and turned to the Minister of Information next to him and said, "We have to move on this," and I trust that the Times may not get the whole loaf, that is reinstatement of Declan
Right.
as bureau chief, but I think that they have a very good chance of he wants to do occasional
Right.
reporting from there after 9 years of investing his life in there.
And so, Reza, as a practical matter, who would actually have to sign off on that if Nawaz said, "We want this guy back"?
Well, I think the declaration of persona non grata for a foreign journalist would have involved the Interior Ministry and Pakistan's intelligence agencies, which report to the Interior Ministry because they give clearance for foreign journalists, and in that case, largely the Interior Ministry. So, I mean, I think whatever we are talking about brings in the fundamental issues that face Pakistan, the civil-military imbalance.
Yeah.
The growing insecurity and the issues of governance, and I think the security of journalists and media as a whole is a segment of that. And
Right.
perhaps, as Kati rightly said, that a free press is what makes a country distinctive in terms of its democratic credentials. So I think it is even more important for the Nawaz Sharif government and the civilian governments, both in the center and the provinces, to sort of assert and prove that Pakistan is moving in that direction.
Joel, question for you: is the situation in India much better for journalists, or what?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
I mean, it's better. I mean,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean India has very significant challenges. There's a tremendous disparity between the national press and concentrated in the major cities, and there is a similar dynamic.
Are Indian journalists being targeted for being journalists?
There have been some killings. There was one killing of a prominent journalist who was covering organized crime in Mumbai. So it's not unprecedented.
But it wasn't a state act.
And actually, there are journalists who cover the Maoist insurgency have been attacked.
I was about to
Journalists
ask
in tribal areas face very significant threats. I don't want to minimize the
Right.
challenges that journalists face in India. They're very, very significant. And India
and
gets a bit of a
Kashmir.
free pass.
Yeah.
A bit of a free
Kashmir
pass
is a
because it's
different-
got a
Yeah.
very lively and vibrant national press. But they simply don't compare to the challenges.
And how about
of journalism.
Afghanistan?
How about Afghanistan? Afghanistan is obviously, I mean, again, it's a different dynamic, but we've had just two absolutely horrendous crimes committed against journalists, and
Yeah.
three
Yeah.
journalists have been gunned down in Afghanistan, including Anya Needham's
Right, I
house.
mean-
It was
Yeah.
just a
One of
horrible
my friends,
incident.
Kathy Gannon,
Yeah, it's
got
horrible
attacked.
incident.
Well, but there's
Yeah.
a slight difference. I mean, I know
Yeah.
Kathy, I've known Kathy
Yeah.
for 20 years. I mean,
We
they
all
were
knew
targeted, I
Anya.
think, for being
Westerners. Yeah.
And the Afghan journalist who died in the Serena Hotel was in the wrong place at the wrong time. So I'm just asking for a sort of baseline. The situation in Pakistan is much worse than Afghanistan and much worse than India?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
I would say that's
hence
correct.
our laser-like focus, because we're going back. I mean, this
when are you going back?
This is, well, we haven't scheduled the trip yet, but
you get frequent flyer points at the Serena Hotel in Islamabad, or?
But I just want to add that I think in the case of India, in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, there have been many incidents, and I'm in touch with a lot of journalists there who work there and who face a lot of problems with the security agencies.
In Indian-held Kashmir.
In Indian-held Kashmir, and also the areas where Maoist insurgency takes place. So I mean, I'm not trying to act as a typical Pakistani reaction to India, but I think just want to lay.
And Peter, I'm not sure that it's helpful in this context to compare. Pakistan and India are compared all the time, but
Well, I think it's useful to say to Pakistan, look, I mean, if part of the argument is that your international image is suffering, and look, in your immediate neighborhood, this is very unusual.
Well, although one thing I will say is there's high levels of violence against the press throughout South Asia. It's definitely Pakistan.
Leading at the moment.
Is off the charts. But we have high levels in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. India, journalists are killed more frequently than people realize. Again, does not compare to Pakistan. But this is a regional challenge.
What can be done, by the way? I mean, Kati and I were talking about this a little bit. I mean, we had Saba Imtiaz was a fellow here, and she's a Pakistani journalist. And I asked her to write a piece after the attack on you for the South Asia channel, which we edit out of here, for foreignpolicy.com. And I said, Saba, she described the problem, and I said, you haven't provided any solutions.
Well, there are some.
Well, and I said some of the solutions I tried to suggest to her. She said, look, they won't work. So one was I learned from the guy who edits Pajwalk, which is the Afghan wire service, that if they do a big story on corruption, they do it as a collective with other. With other journalists.
That is, you've just nailed it. There is an absence of solidarity among Pakistani journalists that is really weakening the entire media picture.
So
that when one is attacked, the others attack the one who's been attacked.
If I may add a bit, I think that is absolutely, we have discussed the state and the non-state part of this matrix, but I think the way Pakistan's media industry has also behaved, especially, because I'm going through this whole process in a month's time. For example, when I was attacked, the other rival TV channels and media groups did not report as much they ought to have. In fact, they completely blacked out the news. After Hamid Mir,
why?
Well, because it was very simple ratings game. If they would say somebody was being assassinated on the streets of Lahore, people would switch to my channel, and the profits and the revenues would go there for 1 week.
That is insane.
It's as insane as that. Yes.
Yeah, and there's an irresponsible media owner culture.
Yes.
That they first of all they don't provide minimal security for journalists.
Okay.
They don't provide minimal training for how to cover highly perilous situations. There's no training.
Okay, so that's something they really could fix.
Yes,
absolutely. Yes. These are tangible things.
No life insurance.
And no life insurance
for reporters who go into Balochistan or other difficult areas. They die, and
all these things are important. But I do want to keep the focus squarely on the government,
and
but there are things that the government needs to do.
But the owners have responsibilities.
Absolutely.
Were you able to have discussions with any of them?
I've not in this trip. I've had many discussions with owners, and
what are the discussions don't go far.
Well, they're constructive in the sense that they acknowledge.
Constructive, I love that word.
But this is a problem.
Challenge instead of problem.
But no, I don't think they can be shamed. Or they can't be shamed easily. Put it that way. And the
by the way, can I throw out an idea?
Just want to end this.
One quick idea, maybe controversial one. Part of the problem is a class problem. That Pakistan's journalists are not seen as sort of. Is this an untrue statement? That there's a little bit like they're sort of like a different class, and therefore they don't need to be protected, and they're not.
No, I think it's changed.
That's changed,
a decade ago.
Okay, but that's still part of the. If it's a decade ago, it's
Yeah.
still part of the
And
makeup.
Peter, I have to say that part of the problem here again is the state and ISI's influence on the press and the relationships that they've forged. That they you know, let's give the media some responsibility for this. This is definitely, but the security forces have exploited this split,
For sure.
ramped it up.
Yeah.
The ISI has made a move in the military to try and shut down.
Wait, we have to get Nick Schmidl in here for this.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
since he was thrown out of
But-
Pakistan.
Yeah, yeah.
Nick, we're talking Pakistan reporting. Nick is a fellow here and was and a New Yorker writer and was thrown out of Pakistan for his reporting, right?
But can I just return for a second
Yeah.
to our core interest in this, and that is to break the cycle of violence against journalists. The key thing is to end the impunity.
Yeah.
And how do you do that? You do that by actually prosecuting the murderers.
Yeah.
And until that happens,
Yes, absolutely.
journalists will be fair
Absolutely.
game.
Absolutely.
Until you see a guy being convicted of murder for the crime of
Before we
hitting a
throw it open,
journalist.
I want to ask,
So-
because there's a question about Hamid Mir here. Okay, so like Hamid Mir leaves Islamabad where he lives, he takes a flight to Karachi and is attacked shortly after he leaves Karachi airport. That implies somebody who has access to airline schedules. This is not something the Taliban has some sort of database about who. I mean, so where does that lead you, Reza?
Well, if you saw Declan Walsh's story, I mean, he has cited some of the investigation he did earlier, and he said that, you know, even a few years ago, Lashkar-e-Jhangvi had infiltrated the Geo network and was trying to use a reporter to murder an editor. This is, I mean, he found it, and then there was another case of infiltration by another extremist organization. So you see, what I'm trying to say is that that while state prosecution, bringing the murderers to justice is very important, but I think the media organizations also have some share of responsibility, and perhaps they could learn a bit from other contexts. You know, in the way, because, you know, after Hamid Mir's attack, it was a time to stand together and perhaps, you know, negotiate and pressurize the state that, you know, this is not on. Instead, what we have is that all the other media houses on one side and GeoTV is on one side, and GeoTV is now labeled as a traitor television network, which should be shut down because it's harming Pakistan's national interest and is an unpatriotic outlet. So you have this complete split now in the middle.
Express calling for Geo to lose its license.
Yes.
Wow.
And where is the
all
collegial
channels, I mean,
solidarity?
and he was in the hospital, and there
So you
were
can-
rival anchors were saying, well, look, why was the traitor not shot in the head? Why have the bullets gone in his leg? I'm translating from Urdu.
Well, who are these anchors?
These are from the rival channels. They said that this traitor channel should be immediately stopped. You know, so this is not the ISI saying it, Joel. I mean, you know, I want to emphasize this point. Yes, the state does have a central role in our society.
Right.
You know, in all post-colonial.
But the problem has to
contexts.
be attacked from every
Yes,
from every
but
angle.
the problem
and
is what do you do with these media owners? With these journalistic bodies which need to have some kind of a conduct.
Well, let's get into the journalistic owners in a little more detail. I mean, who are they?
Well, I mean, first of all, what has happened is that, you know, we allowed cross ownership in early 2000 under Musharraf.
What does that mean?
Well, basically, people who own big newspapers could open up TV channels.
Kind of like Rupert Murdoch.
Like here.
And radio.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you know, following some of the bad practices. You know, and so 5 or 6 groups turned into these mini oligarchs. So GeoTV emerged as the biggest baron, capturing about 60 to 70% of the market share of private TV viewing, of newspaper reading, circulation, etc. So that is at the top. And the rest of the 40% of the private viewership or media consumption is shared between other media owners, and who all want to act as the GeoTV.
Which is owned by Jang Group.
Which is owned by the Jang Group.
Who are they?
The Jang Group, well, I mean, it's a business family from Karachi. But the turning point was the anti-Musharraf campaign, because in 2007, when Musharraf was getting weaker in the domestic political context, GeoTV ran a successful campaign against Musharraf, and which ultimately brought him down and made
Which
him
Hamid
resign.
Mir played a key role in.
In which Hamid Mir was central, yes.
And in fact, because the army was coming to the door of
Precisely.
GeoTV to close it down.
Precisely,
And
he
they-
did. Yeah, it was
they
shut down for 7 weeks as well. Musharraf did clamp down at that time as well, but ultimately Geo succeeded. Now this set up even a more dangerous trend in Pakistan's new media industry, where the barons, 5 or 6 barons thought, we are the new kingmakers. We could bring down the governments, or So this DGISI, antic was another. What has been viewed by some of the commentators as another sort of testing the waters or leveraging your media power against Pakistan's most powerful institution. So there's a bit of a, what is happening is that while the poor journalist on ground, the reporter or the anchor is in the crossfire of these various forces, the barons are playing a very dangerous power game with Pakistan's state centers.
What would be the way to get to the barons to have a?
I think a code of ethics. There's a broadcasting.
But who could initiate? Who could summon such a conference?
There is a regulator, which is Pakistan's Electronic Media Regulatory Authority, PEMRA, and PEMRA has this mandate to convene. And I think it's a very weak regulator, like other regulators in Pakistan. So no surprises there. So PEMRA has a role. I think the journalistic associations like the CPNE. PFUJ have a role to pressurize.
Yes.
They could always mobilize the union power or the collective power to pressurize the barons that they need to stop acting like small tin pot dictators in the Pakistani pond and get out and do something for their workers who are dying left, right, and center.
And does the U.S. have a? The U.S. is not very popular in Pakistan. We're not going to get into drones, but that's certainly a theme. If you spend any time in Pakistan, you engage in that conversation, and we're deeply unpopular. Does the U.S. have a role to play in this beyond?
I think the U.S. government, I would say no, because of the reason that you cited, because it would viewed as it would be viewed as an external intervention, one more plot of the CIA to subjugate Pakistan. So I think it would be better.
By the way, you coming here, is that going to be misinterpreted by some?
I hope not, because I hope not, but then
I think it's an issue.
I think I've been through the worst.
But you mean here to New America?
No,
here
to the United States. Yeah,
two dozen bullets, I suppose, outweigh the infamy of being in Washington. Shall I put it that way?
Okay, we're going to open it up to everybody here. Can you wait for a microphone and identify yourself? And thank you very much. This gentleman here. Yep.
Thank you very much. My name is Malik Siraj Akbar. I am a Pakistani journalist, an exiled journalist. Raza, welcome to the club.
Are you from Balochistan?
I'm from Balochistan, yes. My takeaway from the entire talk is, I think, the traditional behavior of blaming the victim. The gist of the whole conversation seems to be that the media itself is responsible, the journalists have to regulate themselves. But 17 years back, Raza and I, like our mutual boss, Najm Sethi, was kidnapped from Lahore, and the blame was on the ISI. The ISI has been blamed for so long. But my question is, Raza, what do you think is going to be the aftermath of the attack on you? Will the Pakistani media be absolutely silenced? The way your newspaper, for example, Express Tribune, has not run a single op-ed and about the attack on Hamid Mir. The television channels have blacked it out. So what is the aftermath? Will the Pakistani media be absolutely silenced, or will it, trigger a wave of activism for the media's freedom? Because similar to what Kati was saying, overly optimistic attitude towards Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. It was the Ministry of Defense under Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif which moved the resolution that Geo television should be shut down. So what is the democratic government doing about it? Thank you.
Yeah.
I I really don't know what is going to happen, but for sure, I think my newspaper, where I write a regular column, Express Tribune, had already been under attack, and they had even been asking me not to write on certain subjects. They would, the editors would turn it down. And surely it has been silent after Hamid Mir's attack. I think there's a huge, the media is divided. And that is why I was not, towards the end blaming the victim, but I said that the media owners, as businessmen, as corporate interests, do share some measure of, okay, even in the smaller percentage, responsibility for taking care of their employees, and simply that contractual obligation is missing. If you send your people into to cover a bomb blast site without a bulletproof vest or without the necessary equipment or a life insurance, I mean, what are you doing to people? Yeah. You're exploiting them, and this is what's happening. That's the real story of Pakistani journalism as well. Other than the high level, high profile ISI targeting Hamid Mir or Sethi or whoever, these are there, but at the same time there are also these problems. So I'm Siraj, I was trying to kind of make it more nuanced, than
we definitely didn't want to give
the guns after the journalists.
Yeah.
That's true. Everybody knows, but there's much more rot within the industry, and that also needs a debate. But I think at the moment, sadly, there is a culture of silence. I think Kati mentioned that after the attack happened on me, whoever half a dozen or a dozen people who used to oppose the talks with Taliban stopped doing that, and there was a silence. There were more and more sort of calls to appease the Taliban. Our brothers who have gone astray must be brought back and hugged for peace, and they should be. This is I'm translating from Urdu. Yeah. And they are the patriots who just have forgotten the real path, and they should be talked to and negotiated with. So there is this narrative, and after Hamid Mir, what has happened is that also whatever critique of the military or military's policies was there, it was pretty robust, as you saw after the Osama bin Laden operation, these were unprecedented, so the paradox that we talked about right at the start continues in Pakistan. Even the fact that GeoTV could flash the picture of DG ISI for 8 hours shows a little opening in Pakistan's media.
But the gentleman from Baluchistan raises an interesting question, which is if the Ministry of Defense basically officially says that we want GeoTV to close down, is that something the Nawaz Sharif had any role in, or was it something the Ministry of Defense did on their own?
Well, I mean, Peter, if I would like to, Siraj, we have also tampered with our constitutional freedom so much that the Article 19 of Pakistani Constitution, which shows free speech, has a long list of qualifiers. Okay, so you say every person has free speech unless that you cannot talk about against the glory and integrity of Islam. You cannot talk against the defense and security of Pakistan. You cannot talk against, I think, 2 other subjects. There are about 5 qualifiers to freedom of speech. So technically, in a very narrow sense of Pakistani jurisprudence, Ministry of Defense does have a basic case. Sadly, that's how it is, because they can make an argument that Pakistan is in a state of war, and here's a TV channel trying to defame its intelligence apparatus, its military, etc. But of course, there are larger issues, like the issue of democratic space and overall freedom of expression, and there are other articles of the Constitution. So there are problems within the Pakistani, the way we have shaped our Constitution as well, that you cannot directly do that, sadly. I mean, for example, there's something which was constructed by General Ziaul Haq in the 1980s called the ideology of Pakistan. Nobody knows what it is. I mean, there are various definitions. And it is a crime in the penal code to oppose the ideology of Pakistan with a certain punishment. Just as a
lady here in front.
Side.
Hi, I'm Josefa Khanum. I'm from the Embassy of Pakistan, and I wanted to thank all of you for your very interesting comments.
What do you do at the embassy?
I'm a Foreign Service officer and the chief of staff for the ambassador too.
Right.
And he's looking forward to meeting you. Okay, so I was basically just going to say that, of course, there's no condemnation of killing of journalists in any case. But I just wanted to, since you guys were making comparisons, I just wanted to ask a few questions and get some perspectives. For instance, in the US, as an outside observer, sometimes you see in the media when there's gun violence, and it's never really debated in the media. For instance, the Lockheed Martin company that's based in Fort Worth, or like how much of the US economy is based on the defense equipment. And for instance, in India, like some people say that the media is not as anti-government as it is in Pakistan. It kind of toes the government line in most cases. So I just wanted to get some views on that. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your question. You know, there is so much that is wrong with our country, our United States of America. And there are obviously many things. India, too, has its flaws. But our mission is a very specific one. The Committee to Protect Journalists exists. It was founded by a group of American journalists who had worked overseas and were very much taken up with the cause of the problems that our colleagues were having overseas. We're the only organization that is uniquely focused on press freedom issues beyond our borders. It is by no means a statement of America's lack of media shortcomings. God knows we could have a weekend seminar.
In fact, we did a discussion here about that issue not too long ago with Len Downey and
yes.
Rajiv Chandrasekaran right here
Yeah.
about U.S. press freedom challenges. So it's something we do talk about.
We do talk about,
Yeah.
but nor do we wish to act as you know, preachers who land up in countries, you know, with all the answers. We don't have them, but we are concerned about our colleagues in Pakistan, and that's our reason for being.
Well, Joel and Kati, correct me if I'm wrong. There was an American journalist killed in Arizona in the late 70s,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, and it was a car bomb.
Yes.
Right.
Now, didn't a consortium of
Yes.
other all sorts of newspapers and
Right.
TV stations basically get together and say, we are going to investigate
Yes.
what happened here, and they basically
That was-
solved the case. Is that,
Yeah.
or is that? I mean,
They
tell us-
they made very significant progress, and we've seen that strategy emulated, sometimes with success and sometimes without success. A group of journalists from Paul Klebnikov was killed in Russia, tried to create a similar consortium.
Yeah.
It was very challenging. I've seen it happen in Colombia
Yeah.
as well, where journalists have come together.
Yeah.
Did it work in Colombia?
Well, you know, there's always
Yeah.
challenging, but there's more solidarity there. What I have seen in Colombia is different media organizations get together, work collectively on an investigative project, run the story simultaneously on the same day without bylines.
Yeah.
This was at the height of the violence. Can't see that happening in Pakistan.
Can I just also say that I wrote a book about the murder of an American journalist during the Greek Civil War, a man named George Polk, after whom the Polk Awards are named. And the official story was that he was killed by the communists. This was the beginning of the Cold War. And my book, The Polk Conspiracy, I recommend it.
One of 8 books.
Now available in paperback. I unraveled the official story and in fact led the crime to Washington and London and our right-wing allies in Athens. So that's actually how I got involved in the Committee to Protect Journalists. After I wrote this book, I got a call saying, would you like to work on behalf of journalists other than those killed in Greece? And so I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. We don't discriminate against countries. We discriminate against people who attack journalists.
Okay, we'll start with this lady here.
Thank you. Hi, Reza, it's good to see you.
Can you identify yourself?
Oh, sure. My name is Sana Ali. I used to work with the Embassy of Pakistan with Ambassador Sherry Rahman, who's doing great media freedom work as well in Pakistan now. I'm a student at Johns Hopkins SAIS, and I actually am very proud of the fact that in your career you've spoken in Urdu and you've spoken to the majority of people and made a lasting imprint in many conversations. That's something I hope to do as well in Pakistan and discuss all of these things. And you underscored the importance of a code of ethics, something that needs to exist. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about what is a better use of my energy? Should I be speaking on Ahmadi issues and Shia issues and the sectarian violence that's done? Or should we really start on a code of ethics? Is that something that we really need to work on, political parties? And I don't think you have the liberty of choosing. I think you need to do all of that at once. So my question to you is, what is it that political parties who maybe aren't in power can be doing to solidify these media rights? Is there something they can do on local levels? If maybe the Nawaz Sharif government has many federal concerns, are there other things other parties can be doing? Thank you.
Good question.
Yeah, I mean, because Pakistan's electronic media is a nascent industry, and it still does not have a code of ethics. And in fact, if you remember that there were issues like the television channels would show too much violence, body parts of a suicide bomber, and which is not shown anywhere in the world. So then the parliament did intervene in the previous government, and they came up with a parliamentary committee, suggested a code of conduct on what sorts of things could be shown on television in terms, in the context of terrorism. And now, after the Mr. Mee's incident, a parliamentary body has been formed to look into some of these guidelines as to how the TV channels should be reporting on certain issues. But I think the political parties have a fundamental role. They have been shirking that role. I think this is the problem in Pakistan, is that the traditional initiative of governing the country was with the unelected institutions like the military and the civil bureaucracy, that the political parties and the political elites did not come forward, and they have shied away from that particular initiative, and now you see some signs of that. So I agree with you. Yes, the political parties have a role, and along these parliamentary commission types, because that is where such debates must end up.
Okay, we're going
with
to
some
have
resolution.
this gentleman here and David Sedney and this gentleman. We're going to just do three. We're going to start gathering questions because this gentleman, start with.
Yeah, my name is Steve Gorzula. Last year I was in Pakistan, chief of party for a USAID project on hydro and irrigation development in North Waziristan. A couple of weeks ago in this very room, there was a presentation where they described Pakistan as having a Praetorian administration. It was an allusion to the Roman Empire, where the Senate could behave and function well, but if they misbehaved, the Praetorian Guard could step in. From what I'm hearing today, well, all the journalists are fighting among themselves and being killed by apparently the military establishment, the Taliban. Would there be any way that journalists, as well as uniting as has been proposed, with a sort of universal code of ethics, any way that you could convince the military establishment, including the ISI, that you're a very valuable asset for Pakistan rather than a liability?
Okay,
Yeah.
good question. So, David.
Thank you, David Sedney. And I'm currently an independent analyst and commentator. I did work for the U.S. government for 30 years, and
Well, I think explain what your last job was.
I was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Central Asia, and I certainly acknowledge that we in the United States have many failings, including in the U.S. government. It's one of the reasons that's one of the reasons I resigned from my job. I want to express my admiration, Reza, to you and to all the other Pakistani journalists. I'm not going to ask you any of the hard questions because I think it puts you in a difficult position, but I am going to ask Peter and the others a question. First, the comment, however. I feel uncomfortable discussing level playing fields when on one side there's only 5 players and the other side there's about 20. The 5 players are running around in shorts and sneakers, and the other ones have AK-47s and tanks, mortars, and stuff like that. And the more time you spend discussing the level playing field, the less you pay attention to the real issue, in my view. And I think this, to be frank, I thought you spent too much time worrying about the level playing field and not enough time worrying about the reality here. I want to go back to somebody who you had just a few weeks ago, Peter. You had Carlotta Gall here, I think, on the same stage, talking about Pakistan as well. And tie that into a comment Reza made. He said that the anchors were not run by the ISI. Well, that's actually an interesting question, because in addition to the instruments of force that you discuss, there's a long history, and many Pakistani journalists I know have talked to it. The Pakistani intelligence services use positive incentives. They pay journalists. They encourage them to write things that are positive for the government. They encourage them to fight among each other. And so my question for you, Peter, and for the people from the committee, is that besides being against the killing of journalists, which you do tremendous work on, what about helping journalists become good journalists, fair journalists, and resisting those kind of positive incentives? We will give you money. We will get your children into a really good school. And by the way, if you don't, we'll kill you.
Good question. Okay, this gentleman here. Okay, we're going to get to everybody, but make him short now because he's running out of time.
Hi, Idris Ali, Pakistan Press Foundation. Could you talked about Nawaz Sharif's meeting, and it sounded very optimistic. What, if any, mechanisms have you put in place to actually follow through on them? Because governments previous seem to talk the talk, but
okay, great question.
Follow up on that.
Jonathan Landy from McClatchy.
Into December 2007, none of these media owners or their channels had any qualms about rebroadcasting Benazir Bhutto's unproven claims that men around President and General Musharraf were responsible for trying to kill her in Karachi. And they didn't just do that for 8 hours. They went on and on and on and on. And that's still the case today. Yet, so to my question is, to what extent are the media owners other than Geo using the attack on Hamid Mir as an opportunity not just to suck up to the army, but also to try and increase their own audience share?
Okay, good question.
Excellent.
This lady here, and then this lady.
Hi, I'm Tahira Noor. I'm from Pakistan. I'm a Fulbright Fellow here and work with World Bank as a focal person for Universal Healthcare Program. Raza, I'm very happy to see you alive here. Welcome to the safest land on earth. My question is, soon after this Hamid Mir incident, we saw media fraternity divided. And at the same time, we also saw that Prime Minister is going to see Hamid Mir, and Chief of Army Staff is going to see his DGISI. So what do you think? What kind of a message that both were conveying to whom? Was the political opinion also divided, the way media fraternity was divided?
Okay, this lady here.
Hi, my name is Sahar Gul. I'm researcher on extremism and radical Islam since 2006. And my question is from Raza Rumi about the role of Pembra. Do you have an idea that there's history of Pembra that has been, monitoring TV channels and then taking action against them? Because I have been doing research on religious TV channels since 2009 to this date. And I have very interesting findings and hate speech, and I have been just, contacting Pembra. I went over there, they gave me time, and I was, waiting for them to meet, and they didn't do anything. And so I shared very interesting things they could have taken action against. So what do you think what should be done in this regard?
Okay. And the final question is over here. Yeah, I'm taking.
Thank you so much. My question is from Raza. My name is Sher Zaman. I'm from Pakistan. I came here. I'm in Virginia from last 9 months, majoring in media and communication. As Raza talked about various challenges which journalists are currently facing in Pakistan. So what, Raza, you would recommend for a fresh journalist like me who is going back in Pakistan in upcoming 1 or 2 months?
Okay. All right. There's a lot of good questions. I mean, are there any ones that you want us to respond to, and then I'll prompt you with ones if we don't get.
I think I can respond, talk a little bit about the follow-up, and I can also talk a little bit about the challenge of dealing with corruption and pressure in the media and how we manage that.
Yeah, press standards.
Right.
Okay. And
should I
Go for it.
take it away?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. First on the follow-up, I mean, one of the things that we did is we memorialized all the commitments that the Prime Minister made to us, and I think we've left that. There's some copies outside if you want to take that. And we distributed those commitments to all the key actors, including diplomatic community, officials, civil society, diplomatic community, and we've asked them to follow up and hold the government to account on these commitments, the specific commitments that were made. We obviously will be doing the same, and but it's not something that we can do single-handedly. The question is, how broadly will the commitments that were made very publicly, which were memorialized and concretized, be adopted more broadly by the media community and the interests that are defending the media? That's what we're going to see. That's the strategy.
Can I add
Okay.
to that? After this session, I'm going to the State Department to meet with Ambassador Dobbins, who is in charge of Afghanistan and Pakistan for this administration. And I do believe that to reach that magic tipping point, you do have to attack from every angle. And therefore, I think it's very important for us to have the support of the State Department and the White House in their dealings with Pakistan, as unpopular as the United States is in Pakistan. I think we do still have a certain amount of leverage. So we're certainly enlisting the support of the State Department. And then tomorrow I'm meeting with your boss, Ambassador Jelani, to talk about follow-ups to our trip, and plus we made it very clear that we would be returning. So that has them scared.
We'll always come back.
And
yes.
the corruption issue.
And on the corruption
yeah,
issue.
well, the corruption issue, I really agree with your analysis. I think it's important that you brought it up. I'm afraid I'm not going to give you a very satisfying answer because the issue is tremendously complex. Basically, my answer is that the media in every society that I see reflects the dysfunctionalities of that society, including our own. and Pakistan is no exception. But let me give you another example where corruption of the media is an overwhelming problem in the context of this issue, Mexico, okay? There, the dynamic is very different. You have drug traffickers basically making the same offer. Either you write about us in a positive way and we pay you, or you don't write about us and we kill you. And in Pakistan, you described the dynamic very well, but it's different. So what I would say is it's an immensely complex issue. It's one that we have to address in different ways in different societies, but the fundamental thing you need to do in this context is make sure that the government meets its responsibilities, and that responsibility means that when there is violence committed against the press, regardless of the circumstances, when a journalist is killed, there needs to be a systematic, comprehensive investigation, and those responsible need to be brought to justice. And that's the single most important message that we need to deliver over and over and over again. And we can't allow any contextual variables to detract from that clear, defined responsibility that the government has.
And I just want to add that the best cure for corruptible journalists is to pay journalists a living wage. And so insofar as we have any voice at all, any influence at all with media owners, we need to drive home the point that journalists need to be paid what the market bears.
Reza, final thoughts on?
Yeah, I'll just address that. I think what you mentioned about the politics following the attack on Hamid Mir is absolutely spot on, because it has become a kind of a civil-military tension point. And the fact that the Prime Minister and his ministers were backing the GOTV network rather clearly and solidly for many days was viewed as a sign that somewhere within the civilian government was siding with the stance of GOTV being, and being hard on the ISI. And some conspiracy theorists, again on the rival TV channels, went to the extent of saying that it was a plot by the Prime Minister and his party, and it's a conspiracy, mind you. So to actually do all of this, to remove the DGISI from from the scene. So I mean, I don't buy that. But the issue here is that yes, that split has also come into play, and that has also muddled the waters. And you are absolutely right about the corporate interests. I think they are reigning supreme. Beneath all this talk about patriotism and etc. and defense, it is about the fact that the other media houses of Pakistan are sensing that the big beast may actually be expelled from the room, and they'll have all the advertising shares.
Yeah.
So they are pushing and gunning for it. Ban it. It's unpatriotic. It's an agent of the Indians and the West and blah blah blah. So you have this whole narrative on television, and at the core of it, for the media industry, is the profit and corporate interest.
I think the more you know about Pakistan, the less you know about it.
It's so complicated.
It is, but we have the best possible panel to discuss this. And in a way, this subject, as Kati said, it's about the future of Pakistan in a lot of ways, because so I want to thank Kati and Reza and Joel for their insights and times. This is one of the most lively panels we've had. Thank you all for your excellent questions.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the New America Foundation. I'm Peter Bergen. I run the International Security Program here. We have a great panel to discuss the important topic of reporting in Pakistan, which is now, as many of you know, one of the most dangerous countries in the world for journalists to work in. We're very honored to have Kati Martin, who is a longtime board member of New America Foundation, was instrumental in New America Foundation's decade and a half of growth. She's on the board of the Committee to Protect Journalists. She's also the author of 8 books. And she has just recently returned from a delegation that went to Pakistan, met with Nawaz Sharif, the Prime Minister. On that delegation was Joel Simon in the blue suit at the end here, who is the executive director of CPJ. Between them is Reza Rumi, who is a well-known Pakistani journalist. He's author of multiple books, and also contributor to the Friday Times, the Express Tribune, Express News. He's one of the most well-known TV personalities in Pakistan. He survived an assassination attempt on March 28th, a very serious assassination attempt, which happened about a week after Kati and Joel had left their discussions with the Prime Minister and their tour around Pakistan, which was well covered in the Pakistani press about this important issue. And so we're going to have sort of a conversation between the three of us, the four of us, and then we'll open it up to your questions. So Kati, starting with you, tell us a little bit about the content of your conversation with Prime Minister Sharif, and what he said, and the takeaways that you have from that conversation. Joel, chime in as needed.
Yes, please. Well, thanks, Peter. Hello, his own, and the conversation did not stay in the confines of his office, because the following day he repeated officially the concessions that he had made, which I'm about to get to. And I think I had a very distinct feeling that the Prime Minister understands that Pakistan's global image has really suffered as a result of the murder of journalists, the impunity with which that is happening. And by our count, it's 47 journalists murdered, targeted specifically for doing their job. So we're not talking about people caught in a crossfire, but these are targeted assassinations of the sort that thank God, Reza dodged. But he's going to tell you the very dramatic story of how he escaped the assassin's bullets. So the shall I go on? I don't want
no,
to hog
it's
the air.
No, you're not hogging the air. We've got plenty of time. So what did you ask him for? So,
and Joel, please feel free to if I miss something. Here are the things that we agreed to with the Prime Minister, or that the Prime Minister agreed to. The formation of a new body, a council to be made up of representatives of the government and the media, and a special body that will be sort of a central switchboard for cases of abuse of journalists. And journalists who feel threatened will now have a place to go, kind of a hotline, if you will, with journalists on it. And the Prime Minister immediately appointed the third member of our delegation, Ahmed Rashid, whom I'm sure most of you know, the distinguished Pakistani journalist and author, to be the first member of that new body. And Ahmed agreed with only a little reluctance. But anyway, he's on it, and they're going to, I think they've appointed some government officials as well. So that's a body information. Additionally, the Prime Minister also announced a special prosecutor to deal with cases of both murders and other attacks against journalists. And I forgot to say, please turn your cell phones off.
Yes, indeed. Including mine.
Including yours. And so one central special prosecutor and then 4 regional special prosecutors to deal with cases of attacks against journalists. Additionally, he agreed, after we pointed out how painful and cumbersome it is to get visas for American journalists, or Americans in general, to go to Pakistan, he immediately turned. Yes.
That's
yes.
interesting, because a sort of follow-up question there is,
Yeah.
if you're an American journalist going
Yeah.
to Pakistan, you get these Islamabad, Karachi, Lahore visas only.
Right.
Yes.
So was he open to?
Yeah.
That's a very big issue. About
Yeah, it is. I mean, we mentioned that, and he, without committing directly to that specific thing, talked about how important it is that journalists come to Pakistan and cover the country and cover it in a diverse way. And then
government's interest too, because there's only one thing that separates a democracy from every other form of government, and that's a free press. So this is not just a minor issue. It's at the core of American engagement in Pakistan. And although Pakistan is one of the most dangerous places for journalists to work, as Peter noted, we had an extremely productive mission, and came away feeling that the trend was in the right direction. But nothing is ever simple in Pakistan, as all of you Pakistani watchers and Pakistanis know. It's one of the most complex places in the world. So, to return in a long-winded answer to Peter's question about the meeting with Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, it was an extremely, in both tone and substance, an extremely positive meeting. And I've been doing these missions for the Committee to Protect Journalists for 20 years, and have done them in some of the most unpleasant places in the world, because where else do journalists have trouble? And I must say that this was the most positive meeting I've ever had with a head of state, in that there was no defensiveness, no, what are you talking about? You've got the wrong facts. Here are my facts, which diverge from your facts. None of that. No pushback from the Prime Minister. On the contrary, he was well briefed on the issues that we raised, and very of a mind to accommodate our we had a wish list, and he added everybody. First, let me just say how pleased I am that New America continues to engage in this really important conversation about Pakistan and about journalism in Pakistan. Pakistan, however complex and sometimes deeply upsetting and even annoying to the United States government, is a vital partner. And my husband always said that in the AFPAC equation, a phrase that he coined, really it should be PAC-AF, and that Pakistan was the more important factor in that equation. And indeed it is. So we have to continue, like it or not, to be engaged. And for us at the Committee to Protect Journalists, the situation for our colleagues there is dire. And we are going to stay on top of that. And we are determined not only to give these very brave, Reza doesn't like it when I call him the bravest of the brave. He says he doesn't want to be the bravest of the brave, but indeed he is. And people like Reza who really risk their lives on a almost daily basis to cover events in Pakistan are what stand between a purely authoritarian government and an aspiring democracy. So essential not only for us as journalists to have people like Reza free to do their jobs in security, but essential for the United States